Welcome to the Babes Talking Business podcast, the space where female entrepreneurs are elevated and celebrated with your hosts, 𝗦𝗢𝗖𝗜𝗔𝗟 and Rosalind Cardinal.
We're two best friends with over 10 years in business, a global impact and community of thousands. We've talked on stages around the world and have recently navigated the evolution of maiden to mother together. We're here to share the advice, the lessons, and the laughs along the way.
And we're inviting you to sit at the table and be in the room with women who are making bold moves, backing themselves, and showing you what's also available for you.
Welcome back to the Babes Talking Business podcast. I am so excited to have our guest on today, Ros Cardinal, who I personally actually connected with on LinkedIn. I was spying myself and trying to network with other women who are passionate about feminine leadership and supporting women in leadership roles. And Ros actually popped up. I know she's an executive coach. She supports women in leadership in usually the corporate roles and maybe stepping into coaching as well. So when we first connected, we had a bit of a chat. I was like, "Ooh, I'd love to have you on the podcast." And I even got her to come in and talk to some of the leaders in my team. So today you get to hear from the beautiful Ros.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
So excited to have you here. So maybe we can start by sharing a little bit more about your story and where you started, because you've been working in the you started in the corporate space yourself, right?
Yeah, look, I started back in the Commonwealth Public Service here in Australia. So I started in, I think it was about 1986 or 87. I can never actually remember. And it would, it's ancient history. I can't be bothered going back and having a look. But yes, I've been kicking around the government and then the corporate world since, that time. And there's been a lot of change. It's been one of those things where for women, particularly, as we're talking about women in leadership, there's been a lot of change, but there's still a lot of work to do.
So what inspired you to step out of the corporate role yourself and actually start supporting more women in corporate and in leadership? What was that journey and transition like for you?
Look, it's something that it kind of, I spend a lot of time in male-dominated industries. So one of the things about being a public servant is that, and starting in the sort of personnel, HR, was personnel, became HR, became people and culture. But starting in that space, one of the things that I found really curious was the majority of workers in, HR back in those days were women, but the boss was always a man. And I always found that super interesting. It's like, where do these men come from? Because I'm certainly not seeing them in my peer group. And then all of a sudden they sort of pop in as leaders. And like you might have had, 30 people in HR and, 28 of them would be women and be two men, there'd be the director and kind of like the guy below him. And so I always found that interesting and curious to me. And look, I, worked hard and I sort of started to climb the ladder, and then I shifted over to the corporate world and worked in the energy industry, which was very male dominated. And, just one of those kind of things where you look around the company and top 50 senior leaders is only 6 women. And that's, something that's pretty typical of that industry. So there was always this curiosity about why that is. Like, why haven't we got as many women in leadership as you would normally expect? And, look, back then there was always this sort of thing of, women just go off to have babies and they don't come back to work, and that's kind of the end of their career. Or they have babies and when the kids go to school, they go back to work, but they've lost all of this time. So they start from scratch again, and that was always put forward as the reason why women aren't in senior leadership roles. And so, worked my way up the ladder to a senior role. And it was, I was loving the work I was doing. We were working in, organizational culture development and so on, and we're doing some great stuff. And I was diagnosed with cancer. So that was in 2010. And it was one of those huge wake-up calls that I'm sure that anyone who's experienced a major illness or a major life event like that would appreciate. The fact that you reflect on all the things you wanted to have done and wanted to have achieved. And you do think at the time when someone says you've got cancer, the first thing that springs to mind is, this is it, I'm going to die. And then you start regretting things. It's like, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that, I wish I'd spent more time on this or that. And so, I had 6 months treatment, which was 6 months where I couldn't really do very much. And it was an interesting shift for me because I'd spent my whole career delivering, doing this sort of sense of adding value, doing a lot of things and feeling like I had my sense of self attached to my work. And all of a sudden I didn't have that anymore. And so I was sort of sitting on the couch, miserable all the time, feeling really rotten. And in amongst that, I suppose it was just that opportunity to not do anything. It was forced upon me, but it was a real like taking pause and really reflecting on, as I started to get better, what I really wanted to do with my life. And so it was a massive big shift for me around this. I want to add more value. I want to start figuring out this problem of why women aren't achieving, aren't reaching the heights that they should be inside businesses. I really want to start exploring that. I want to start supporting women. My daughter started work, and she started as an engineer, and she was experiencing the same kind of issues that, I'd experienced early in my career. And I looked at it, went, nothing's changed in a generation. So what's going on here? And look, there were other things involved as well. Like we decided, we'd always wanted to travel overseas, and we just hadn't gotten around to it because, the kids were too young. The kids were in school. The kids were this age. The kids were doing that. There's always a reason, not enough money, whatever. And so I said to my husband fairly early on in the treatment, I said, if I get through this, I really want to start traveling. And so we did that. And I didn't jump straight away out of my corporate role. I took time to think about it. And I left in 2012, so the beginning of 2012. But in the meantime, I'd really thought hard about what I wanted to be doing, what value I wanted to be adding, how I wanted to structure my business. It wasn't kind of a knee jerk, right, I'm back at work and I'm leaving again tomorrow. It was a well thought out process. And look, I haven't looked back. It's been fabulous. So that was really the catalyst for the whole thing for me, was this really big shift in my circumstances.
I love that. And I feel like a lot of women that I even get to work with in business and support, they have that moment, right? Whether it's something's happened in their health, or it's something's happened in their life, or it's motherhood, where you just have the opportunity, like it's called like a season of pause. And sometimes it's chosen and sometimes it's forced upon us, but you do really think about what's important to me and what are my values and how do I want to contribute and what's the work that I enjoy. And even just like you said, like creating a business that allows you to travel more. And I know you've got grandkids now, and I know that
Yes.
part of that is being able to be with your grandkids. So yeah, I love that we've been able to touch slightly on even just women being able to create more value-led businesses and careers in that space as well. But from you being in corporate, now you're supporting women in corporate. I know you said not much has changed in those generations, even seeing your daughter go through it. What are the issues that you see, or the common things that women are facing in leadership in the executive or the corporate space?
Look, I've been finding as I coach senior women that there's some common things that come up. There's the undoubted existence of the boys' club, and there aren't as many women at senior levels as there should be, given the number of women in the workforce in general. We would expect to see more women. We're not seeing that. And it's not necessarily something that's done deliberately. It is just simply that when we choose people that we want to promote, we choose people that we know, like, and trust, in the same way as when we're selling something to somebody, the know, like, and trust factor. And we tend to know, like, and trust the people who are like us. So, if people are looking at, say, you've got an executive team of all men and they're looking at the next promotion, they've got, vacant position, and they've got a choice between a man and a woman, they do tend to choose the man because of the fact that, he's one of us, he's like us, he's going to be familiar to us. So it's not a conscious thing. It's very much, all of this unconscious bias. But women do face that as a challenge, this issue of, how do you get your foot in the door? And look, I read a Business Chick survey a few years ago where they surveyed members, and somebody summed it up beautifully. She said, we can keep knocking on the door, but the handle's on the inside. And so that's a big issue for women. This is the boys' club issue. There is the issue of, women do tend to do the majority of caring, for children and for elderly parents. There are some men out there who are amazing at this, don't get me wrong, but in a lot of households, the burden of that falls to women. So they do tend to put their career on hold in various ways. Like, there are women I speak to at middle management who are saying, I'm really ambitious and I want that next level, but I can't because my kids are too young, and if I do that, who's going to look after the kids? This is after school pickup, that kind of thing. So there's always this trade-off for a lot of women, between family and career that they have to really balance up and consider. And then there's the issue of women's confidence. Women do struggle with confidence. Women, do tend to undervalue what they do. They tend to undersell themselves. They don't negotiate as effectively for pay rises. They tend to accept what's given to them rather than asking for what they really want. They tend to not put their hands up for projects because we think that our work will speak for itself. And in a perfect world, it would, but it often doesn't. So women tend to hold themselves back in a lot of ways from not actually stepping up and saying, this is what I want and this is the pathway that I intend to take. And there's a lot of research around that. I know we've all heard that old story about, a man will apply for a job when he feels about 80% qualified. A woman waits till she feels 120% qualified before she puts her hat in the ring. So there's sort of, there's other issues tied up in that. But those are the main ones that I see, is really the boys' club, this issue of work-life balance, and then this issue about women's confidence.
Working closely with women, because a lot of that, like you said, it's unconscious bias. Some of it is just the reality of women's demands or values outside of the workplace. But actually, when it comes down to women's actual abilities, do you feel like women and men do need to lead differently in the workplace, or some are better equipped at different leadership positions, or women aren't exerting their leadership, or maybe they're not leading in a way that is actually allowing them to maximize their strengths and their unique gifts? So what have you kind of found in regards to women's leadership skills in corporate opposed to men's?
And that was the subject of a big piece of research I've been doing since 2016. And again, coming back to this issue where I was seeing my female leadership clients who were getting to a certain point in their career and looking at the jobs above them and going, I don't think I want that life. I don't think I need the pressure. I've got to look after my kids. I've got to do all, I've got a life outside of work. And they were looking at it and saying, there's too much pressure. The expectations are too high. And even men struggle with it. There are certain men who thrive in that environment, but a lot of men these days are starting to want more. They're wanting to, I want to see my kids grow up. I don't want to be, at my desk 24/7 and on call. And so women are looking at that and saying, I don't want that life, and choosing to exit. So a lot of women, still do come to me for exit coaching. It's like, I don't know what to do next. I'm really ambitious, but I'm looking at, the next level. I don't want to be an executive. I want to go and do something else. What does that look like? And so I started asking women to share their leadership experiences. What was it like to be a leader inside businesses and leaders of their own business? So I did talk to women who own their own businesses. And what came out of that was a really interesting piece around how when women are left to their own devices to lead, we actually do lead differently from men. It's a different way of doing things. I often think of it quite simply as, men prefer the hierarchy, with one person at the top, and that sort of scarcity thing where the higher you go, the fewer jobs they are. It's almost like this competitive environment that really suits them, whereas women aren't really comfortable with that. Women together, it's more like a Venn diagram. It's very connected, and I actually heard it. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and I honestly can't remember what it was. It'll probably come back to me at some point. But again, there was this discussion about it, and this sense that men are happy with competition and women are much more happy with collaboration. And obviously there are exceptions to that, but it really is this sort of sense that women are not, the modern workplace is not structured to suit women's leadership. It's structured to suit the way that men like to lead. And so when women rise through the ranks, their leadership is either has to change dramatically to fit that sort of male construct, or they have to pause their career and go, I'm actually not going any further, or exit out, head up a not-for-profit, start their own business, whatever that is. And so that became a real curiosity piece for me. Like, why is it? Like, what have we done? Like, how is this, being created? And so I explored tribal leadership. I had a look at what First Nations people do. I read a lot about leadership, and it really kind of, the aha moment for me was thinking about the Industrial Revolution, and that's, the modern world of work was designed and happened then. And that aha moment of the fact women just weren't there. We weren't there when the modern world of work was designed. And so we had no input. So everything about the way that work is structured and designed, the way that leadership works and what's valued in the leadership space was designed by men for men. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's like we need both. It's it's not an either or, it's a both. And when we look at women-led businesses, they're actually very different. Women lead differently. It's very collaborative. It's very connected. It's very, it's far less hierarchical. It's much more of a flat structure. Yeah. And I found that really super interesting. And it sort of brought me back to thinking about many, many years ago. I started working in an organization that had a sales team, and they decided to remove the manager because they said, we don't need a manager. The guys are so independent, all men. And they made them a self-managed work, almost like a self-managed work team. And within a couple of weeks, the guys had elected somebody they called their first amongst equals. So they actually felt really uncomfortable not having that hierarchy, not having that, person above us to report to. Whereas women seem to be much more comfortable with that idea of flat structure and this idea that we all contribute equally. So yeah, so that's where the kind of the thinking and the research took me, is this idea that men and women do things differently. So I really wanted to define what that female leadership looked like. And I had 538 women who contributed to focus groups and interviews and data collection in that initial phase. And out of it grew a new model for women's leadership, which we've now had over 10,000 women take the assessment. And it's the work is, look, there's a lot of work still to do. I'm sort of really excited about where the future of this takes us. But I just love the fact that we were able to collectively, from these 538 women, create a model that really defines what women's leadership looks like when women are at our best.
Yeah, and I'm excited. That's going to be a whole conversation in a second too. I'm excited to delve into that because I know that was personally something that I wanted to do. And I was telling Shani about it because I feel like we've been in business coming to our 10th year now, and we've led thousands of women around the world. And leadership, I feel like, especially like if you've worked in corporate, I feel like a lot of us do get exposed to masculine leadership. Like you don't realize there's this other way. And for a lot of us, when you're thrown into leadership without leadership development and training, you do just default to this masculine leadership style because that's what we've been taught. And that's usually what we've been exposed to in our jobs. And so we've kind of been finding our own feet with leading women. And I think a lot of the things that we spoke about was there's definitely like this different natural style that women tend to do, where, like you said, we're more empathetic, we like to collaborate, we do a lot more inclusivity, we're not really driven by competition. It's like our superpowers are the emotional intelligence and long-term relationships. And it's been really interesting to a lot of what we've learned has just been from experience and trial and error. And so when we came across your assessment, we're like, oh, it's cool to have just some kind of tool that is able to kind of show us not only what our strengths are, but I love there's the other side where it was able to reflect to us there's what our, not so much what our weaknesses are, but what we can work on as well. Because obviously everything, when you've got awareness of something, then you know where to focus some energy and time improving it. So excited to chat about your assessment tool, because I think that's something that even we were excited to share with our leadership team. But before I do, I also want to go back to what you were talking about, a lot of women opting out of corporate or leadership positions. So I feel like a lot of the women that I work with who've had success in my profession, so network marketing, that was one of the reasons what actually brought them to network marketing, because they had success in corporate or in their leadership positions in big businesses and companies. And they felt like they were working as men, like to compete with their colleagues. I remember one of my girlfriends actually went for a promotion, but she realized the woman that she had to become, she kept referring to as a ball breaker. She's like, I feel like I have to be a ball breaker and I don't want that. Or some other women, even me included, I was working as a child safety officer, and for me, the next level was a team leader. And I remember thinking, for me to go for that next level for a promotion, the responsibility and the hours were so long that I felt like I would be choosing between my career and being the mum that I wanted to, which is what drove me out of my profession to go find somewhere where I could have both. Do you find that is still a big part of corporate is women opting out, or do you find some workplaces are creating workplaces and conditions where women do get to have both, like you said, because most women are the primary caregivers of their kids? Are workplaces evolving at all, or are the women kind of being driven out if that's what they're choosing to do, if they want both?
Look, some are, and it's really lovely to see that. I was working with a really wonderful woman who really embodied the empowered archetypes in my model, and she was the general manager of a business and created this really family-friendly environment. It wasn't just for women. This was about men as well. If you want to knock off at 3 and go and take your kid to a soccer game, feel free to go and do that. And she really role modeled that behavior and created a completely different environment for her company. So there are companies out there doing it. There's certainly some doing it really well. But there are others who've got work to do. And we do see, particularly in government, for example, my government coaching clients, a lot of really frustrated women. They're saying, look, I've reached middle management. The next step is to, deputy secretary or whatever that looks like, or the layer below. And they're looking at it and going, I don't want that life. I really am looking at it and going, seriously, I don't want to do that. This is crazy. And so they're saying to me, I want to do something else and I don't know what that is, because I'm still really ambitious. I want a career of some sort. And look, I've coached women who've left corporate and become the CEOs of not-for-profits and doing amazing, amazing work, heading up charities and, not-for-profit organisations in all kinds of different spaces. And so they're finding their fulfilment that way, which is wonderful for them and wonderful for their new organisations. But then you look at that and go, but that's to the detriment of the organisation they left, because if you're repelling really talented, wonderful women who can then easily snap up a CEO job in another sector, it's like, think of what that woman could have done inside your organisation if she'd been allowed to flourish and thrive. So, the answer to the question is that, some are doing it really well, but there are a lot that aren't. And you're tapping into what you were saying about the role models we have as women in leadership. When we look at leadership, we do tend to see men, because that's, you can't be what you can't see. And when you've been led by males all your life, you look at it and go, that's the way I have to behave. And that's what I did for a really long time, was I looked at that and went, that's what leadership looks like. And then it's the double-edged sword, because when women behave like that, then they are seen as ball breakers. You know, they're too bossy, they're too bitchy. She carries her balls in a handbag, those kinds of things. She's too aggressive. And then if women don't do that, then they're told they're too weak, they're not assertive enough, they're not speaking up, because they sort of get trampled all over by the men in their team. And so for a lot of women, it's a no-win situation. And the women I speak to who are successful in those environments, it comes at a huge cost for a lot of them. You know, it's like, I've made the decision not to have children, or, you know, I mean, that suited them at the time. It's been like, I did make that choice between motherhood and career. And we shouldn't have to do that. You know, we should be able to do both if we want to. Everybody should be able to do both, not just women. It should be men as well, should be able to have a family life and integrate that into work in a really sensible way.
Yeah. I love this conversation so much, which is why I'm so passionate about supporting women and feminine leadership. And obviously, this is a business podcast. I know a lot of our listeners are women who have started their own businesses, or they've started out and they've got their business. But I know there's some who've even grown to a point where they are small businesses with employees. So what advice would you have for people who are growing workforces? Like, I think about even my husband, who is a team of like 30. Like, what have you seen is working well for workplaces who are accommodating for those women? Is there any tips you would have for people who are very conscious in wanting to create a workplace that allows these women to thrive?
Look, there's a few things that I've seen work really well. One of the ones which we all know about, which is gathering traction, is the 4-day working week, which is this idea that we pay people for 5 days worth of work. They do 5 days worth of work, but they do it in 4 days. And it's been very successfully trialed, this idea that people can do it, because one of the things about a 5-day working week is that we fill it up. And I've certainly found the same. Like, I've dropped to a 4-day working week because I have my grandbabies on Thursdays, which is wonderful. But I'm finding I can still be just as productive in 4 days a week. It's just that all the messing about gets cut out. It's like I'll just wander up and make myself a cup of tea. I don't do that. It's like I'm head down, get the work done while I'm at my desk, and I can do 5 days worth of work in 4. And that works for people. This idea of giving people extra time off, flexible working, you know, being able to work at any time, any place. My son works for a great company at the moment. He's in IT, and they've got he's not a new baby anymore. Jackson is about 6 months old, and he has been able to work flexibly. His company that he works for is based in the US. My son's in Australia. And they basically said to him, whatever you need to do to work around the fact that you've got a new baby, just do that. They don't care when the work gets done, as long as it gets done. And that, again, allows people to have a life. And, you know, so COVID was a wonderful opportunity to do this differently. And we saw that. We saw people, like, I had clients in Sydney who suddenly said to me, you know, I used to commute 3 hours a day, an hour and a half in, an hour and a half out. And now I've got that time in the morning to walk the dog, to spend time with the kids. We all have breakfast together like a family. We haven't done that in years, ever since the kids were small. And they're just loving it. And then a lot of organisations are clawing that back now. So there's that sort of thing. You can also support women. I mean, I did a piece of work for one of the engineering companies down here who had a number of women who were going on parental leave around about the same time. And they said to me, we want you to coach them so that they get the opportunity for some coaching before they go on leave, during their leave, and then when they return to work. And that was about giving them the support they needed to ask for what they wanted. So when I first started, the very first coaching client I had, the first of those women, they didn't even have an area set up at work where you could pump milk privately. And that was one of the things that she asked for. She said, look, we need a meeting room, you know, a private meeting room with a lockable door, you know, not the disabled toilet, but somewhere where women can, and not just women, but somebody who feels ill can go and lie down, or somebody who needs to pray in their religion can go and pray. And so these kinds of things are starting to happen. Organisations are starting to pay more attention to it. They're starting to be very flexible around people returning to work after having kids. You know, look, it's the law these days, but there's a lot more flexibility going into that. So organisations are taking it seriously, but it's still not seeping through to the very top. You're still seeing the very top of the organisation where it's like you've got to work crazy hours, you've got to be on all the time, you've got to be available. There's really no space for that. So people with families are tending to kind of cap out at more middle management ranks, because once you go past that, the expectation is still there.
Yeah, and they're just deciding it's not worth the responsibility for their values, especially as young mums, which I can totally resonate with. I was just saying, we were just talking to some girlfriends before, and we were recording a podcast around business and motherhood and juggling the both. And I'm in a few Facebook groups for women who have businesses, and I see a lot of them post saying, hey, mums, what are your options, or what are you doing for work around the kids? And I'm like, just reading the comments, because I guess I always say I'm privileged, but I'm not privileged because it's not luck. I was very intentional about creating the business that I have. So I haven't been in that position, but I'm seeing these women in the comments say, like, you can work for this company and you can do this, and they have work from home options, but they have very strict contracts around kids can't be in the home or kids can't be present. So I'm like, that still isn't really catering for women who are trying to
And
do both.
it's so unnatural, isn't it? Because before we started this thing called work, we lived and worked with our children around us. You know, we strapped our babies on our backs and we went out and did what we had to do. We worked in the fields. We, you know, ran our shops, whatever it was we were doing with our kids around us. You know, we had our families around us all the time. And then 250 years ago, we just suddenly decided that wasn't the right way to do things, and that we had to leave our families and go off and do something, you know, in a workplace. But, you know, I was talking to a beautiful group of women just recently who were considering, they're in the accounting industry, and they were thinking about starting a women-only firm because of the fact that they all had young children or were intending to start a family. And they said to me, it'd be so great because we just sort of envisaged this space where we could all work together and we could bring our babies to work and we could support each other. So if someone's got a client meeting, somebody else will mind their baby for them while they go and have the client meeting, and then they've got their baby. And look, there's obviously logistics to work through around that. It's not an easy thing to do, but I loved the concept. I loved the idea that they were thinking about how do we work with our children around us, not separated from our children.
And it's crazy because you put women together, and women can do that. That's the beauty of feminine leadership, isn't it? We do think about how can we collaborate, how can connect, how can everybody win here. So yeah, it's such a beautiful.
I remember, years and years ago when one of my early jobs was at the Australian Taxation Office in Canberra, and we had this big empty basement in the building. And I remember pushing quite hard for why can't we create a childcare centre in the basement so that people who work here who've got kids, I didn't have kids then, but people who work here with kids can have their kids literally downstairs, so they can just duck down when they need to. It means breastfeeding women can duck down and feed their babies without having to, you know, pump milk or all those sorts of things. And it didn't get up because too expensive, insurance, how would we organise that? It's not the tax office's responsibility and so on. But I remember pushing really hard and being so disappointed when it didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I'm very lucky to be in the space I am, because I see women just being so like in small business, they are very innovative and they are thinking about how can we do things. Like even me and my girlfriends were like, all right, well, let's do shared nannies, and like we'll do this day and you'll share, and we'll all work in our businesses. And that's what women do when they come together. So I'd love to know, with the years of experience you've had supporting women, I know you've been able to create this beautiful survey and had so many, how many women do you say you've been able to get to do it?
It's over 10,000 now. So
10,000 women's experience.
Pretty phenomenal. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. What have you found from that? Like I know you've created some archetypes and you found some main leadership styles. Did you want to talk through how the assessment works and what it helps women identify and work on?
Sure. So the model came out with 4 empowered archetypes and 4 shadow archetypes, which are sort of corresponding what we do when things aren't going well. And it really was almost crowdsourced. Like I just got women to tell me, what's it like being a leader? When you think about yourself at your very best, what does that look like for you? How does leadership show up for you? And also conversely, when things aren't going well, what are the kinds of things you notice about yourself? And so we've got, if we sort of look at the 4 empowered archetypes first, we've got the sovereign right at the top. And the sovereign is our sense of self-worth. The sovereign is when we're at our best. It's that sense of joy. It's that sense of being self-actualized. It's being the best we can possibly be, loving life. Everything is going really well for us. And that's the most important place to work, because if we don't have a solid sense of self, it's almost impossible to spend time in the other empowered archetypes, because that sense of I'm comfortable in my own skin. I know who I am. I'm purposeful. I'm driven. I align with my own values. I'm really clear about who I am. Now, the sovereign is unconcerned with what other people think of her. And it's not that she doesn't care. It's just it doesn't mean anything to her. It's like, regardless of what other people think of me, I believe in myself. So it's this beautiful strength that comes with the sovereign archetype. That's, sense of inbuilt power. It's a very powerful style, but it's used for self. That's really the key thing about it. And then underneath with the sovereign, we've got 3 more archetypes, empowered archetypes, and they are based on motivations. That's the kind of things that motivate people. And it's also situational. People will have tendencies for some over the others, but the idea is that you then have access to these 3 archetypes to use the right style at the right time at the right place. And so we start off with the warrior archetype, who is the one who sets and get, the goal getter. She sets goals, she achieves things, she holds big vision. She's the one who's moving things forward. She's always on the lookout for something new and interesting to do. She thrives in challenge. She loves this idea of give me something big and chunky to just get my teeth into and get it done. But she's not acting out of ego. It is this beautiful sense of she does it just because of the joy of achieving, which I love about that archetype, the sense of we just get stuff done. It's one of my favorite places to live. It's just getting things done, big vision, big achievements. And then we've got our wise woman archetype, which is the sense of influence and power. But when women use power, it tends to be very much for the good of the collective, socialized power, this idea that power is a good thing to be shared. So if wise woman is very influential, but a lot of it's about knowledge. So these women are experts in their field, and they mentor and they support and they coach and they share their knowledge freely with other women because of this idea that knowledge is power and power is good and everybody should have some of it. So they don't hoard it. This is very much this sense of disseminating knowledge through the world. And the combination of sovereign wise woman is an incredibly powerful combination. You see those women on the world stage. But a lot of wise women you see behind the scenes as well. They're quite often the power behind, like power behind the throne. They'll be the advisor to somebody who's in power. So you really do see that wise woman archetype popping up all over the place. But it's this beautiful sense of, learning. There's a lot of, lifelong learning. Growth is really important. I'm constantly learning and disseminating that knowledge to others. And so you find them leading, collectives in a lot of ways because of that sense that people look to them because of what they know. And then we've got our tribe builder archetype, which is the one who creates collectives, brings people together. She collaborates. The tribe builder loves people and loves spending time with people and drawing them together to create great things. But again, it's not ego driven. So she doesn't, it's not because she feels any kind of ego attachment to it. It's just simply, I just love people and I love bringing them together and seeing what we can all do together. We can collaborate, we can support each other, we can have fun together. It's, really a very beautiful archetype. And so you've got those empowered archetypes, which you can then use with, like I said, at the right time with the right people. So if you've got to get something done, you lean into your warrior archetype. If you need to be influential and support other people in that sort of sense of influence and growth, you can use that wise woman archetype. And if you need to create a team, you use your tribe builder. And then sitting beneath these are the 4 shadow archetypes, which are the ones that happen when we're not at our best. And it doesn't mean there's anything drastically wrong with us. It's just, having a bad day, overwhelmed, got a lot of pressure, maybe didn't get a lot of sleep last night. It can be little things. It can be big things too, but a lot of it is the little things. And that's our threat response. So where we go when we're feeling under threat or under pressure. And so the tyrant is the shadow of the warrior archetype. And the tyrant is, again, getting stuff done, but she's got this incredible sense of urgency. So it's this feeling like I'm not good enough unless I'm delivering. I've got to do things in order to prove myself. If I'm not delivering, if I'm not adding value, I don't know who I am. And so there's a lot of pressure and urgency in that. So the tyrants burn out. You see that they're perfectionistic. They have imposter syndrome, that whole sense of I'm never good enough. No matter what I do, I can never be good enough. So they're always driving themselves way, way too hard. They overwork. And that's the one that you see come out in a lot of women who step into very senior leadership roles, because this sense of I have to be delivering and over-delivering in order to prove my worth. We've got our lone wolf archetype, which is the shadow of the wise woman. And that's when the wise woman's beautiful, I have knowledge and I share it freely, becomes I have knowledge and that's my sense of power and control. And I'm not going to share my knowledge because if you know more than me, then you can replace me. So they don't delegate, they hoard knowledge. They often can be very influential, but they work for their own benefit rather than for the good of the collective. So they quite often are doing the moving and shaking, but it's the moving and shaking for their own benefit. And you quite often see it manifest itself in the trappings of success. So the woman who's like, I'm going to buy a designer handbag, but I have to put it on Facebook so that everybody knows I've got it, rather than just buying it and enjoying it for the sake of it. It's a beautiful handbag. It feels amazing. I love using it. It feels great when I use it. It's like, I need to show everybody my designer handbag so you know how successful I am. There's a difference in the motivation behind it. And then we've got our martyr archetype, which is the shadow of our tribe builder, and that's the people pleaser. It's that sense of I love people, but I need people to love me. It's a need rather than a delight. It's I need you to like me. How do I behave? What do I do? How do I make decisions to make sure people are always going to like me all the time? So they become victims. They sacrifice themselves in the service of others to the point where they burn out again because they're not refilling their own cup. The oxygen mask is, putting everyone else's oxygen mask on before their own. I always say to people, don't keep other people warm by setting yourself on fire, because that's what tends to happen. And then the bottom of the diamond is our hermit archetype, which is where people go when things are not going well for them. And it's that withdrawal, procrastinating, avoiding people we don't like. I called it the hermit because it's retreating into a hermit cave. That's that sort of space where you just don't want to leave the house. I'm not going to deal with any of this. And the thing about it is that when you're doing it, it's not helping, but you can't help it. So that's the model in a nutshell. And that was I think the beautiful thing about it, like I said, is that it was really almost like a crowdsourced model. I found that I just had to take all the bits that people had told me and just sort of put them into buckets. Like there's a whole, people are telling me this, let's put that in a bucket. There's some other things that are in common here, let's put that in a bucket. And then it was just a matter of distilling all of that and going, wow, there's a model in this, which I didn't set out to create it. It's just happened like that.
I was going to say, when you do the assessment, which I have done, so I'm excited to get my own results, is it that it's helping you find your own authentic style of leadership? Do you usually prominently lean into one or two, or do you find, is the idea of the assessment to show you how you can utilize all four in different aspects of your leadership?
It is that. So people vary enormously. You get people who are fairly even across all four of the empowered archetypes. You get people who might have a really very strong one and very weak in the others. So people with a weakness in some of them. So for myself, for example, tribe builder is never going to be a natural thing for me. It's something that I have to consciously work on because I'm very introverted. It's not something where I kind of go, yay, people, it's kind of like, oh, people, love people. So I struggle with that, but it's, again, that sense of knowing that's what I need. So it's like, if I've got to bring a team together, it's knowing that I need to activate that tribe builder archetype and knowing what that looks like and being able to enact those behaviors. So like I said, some people will find that they're pretty even across all of them. Others will find that there's things to work on. But when people get the results back and read the descriptors, everybody kind of goes, wow, this is me. This is exactly me. And people have said to me, I couldn't describe my leadership until I got these results. And now I've got words for that. I can use these in my LinkedIn profile. I can put these in my resume. When I talk about leadership and someone says, can you describe your leadership? Here's the words that I can use. So I love that about the model as well.
And so do you think it gives women kind of like a permission slip maybe to stand in their own power, but this is how I lead and these are my superpowers? But then
absolutely,
it's also giving them an opportunity to look at, maybe this is what I need to work on, because without that awareness, maybe they haven't been able to articulate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the things about threat response in humans is that we all respond to threat. It's one of those things where threats don't have to be big things. Like I said, it can just be, I'm overtired, bit ratty today, and someone cut me off in traffic on the way to work. It's that sort of thing. If it doesn't take much for a human to slip into threat response, because our brain is constantly looking for threat. It's looking for danger. This idea of we're wired to be scanning the environment all the time for things that are going to kill us, because it wasn't that long ago when that was true. Like everywhere you went, there was something out there that would kill you. A saber-toothed tiger would eat you. So our brains are wired to keep us safe. So they're constantly on alert for threats. So it doesn't take much to slip into those threat responses. And it's really important as leaders to recognize those threat responses in ourselves. Like, where do I go when things are not going well for me? And recognizing the limitations and the impact that you're having on other people, and then choosing to do something different. It doesn't mean the threat or the threat response goes away. It just means that I manage it effectively. So when I feel like I want to be the tyrant, for example, when I find myself stressing out and working too hard and overwhelming myself, I've got tools to go, I just need to stop doing this and take a breath. The feeling of wanting to do it isn't going to go away. That feeling of urgency, I've still got to manage that, but then I can choose different behavior.
Yes. I was so excited. So Shannon and I have actually just done the assessment, and we got Ros in front of our leadership team so we could all be empowered with our leadership, because Shannon and I have been really open and honest with our leadership lessons over the last decade. We've done a few different podcasts on it. And I feel like for the first 4 years of our business, we led very much in our masculine. Like we were I don't know the archetypes well enough, probably the tyrant. I think if I'm listening to that, was like, this is how it's done. This is how you do it or go. And I just, like, it's not that we didn't care or didn't have empathy. We just didn't know how to infuse that. And then I think we both became mums, and consciously or unconsciously that softened us and maybe gave us a different way of leading, because we had a different perspective and probably understanding of different things that happen when you become a mum, which was the majority of our team that maybe we couldn't relate to before. But now I actually find myself on the other end of it. I know we were talking about this before we press record, where I feel like now I'm on the other side where I'm maybe not too empathetic. I don't know how to find that line now between calling someone on their shit and being like, you say you want this and you say that you want to be a leader, but what I'm seeing is this. Or sometimes it's like, do I even need to call them on it, or is that just something I need to acknowledge and I can see and they'll work it out in their own time? Like it's funny how I've gone really, really confident and maybe too much in my masculine, where now I feel like I've gone too far in my feminine, where I avoid conflict because I don't want. Does that make sense?
It does. And it's because we don't, if we've operated in masculine and then we drop that side of it, we don't have a model for conflict, because we've seen conflict done through that masculine lens, which is that, I'm sorry, I'm tired of your shit, you've got to stop doing it and move on, kind of thing. That's that very sort of direct way of handling it. When you sort of move into more of that feminine space, that collaborative space, that idea of, you don't have a model for how do we do that? How do we have that conversation? Because we don't tend to have them from that frame. And so one of the things about the empowered archetypes is that they're not soft and fluffy. They are capable of holding the line. So it's leaning into maybe the wise woman archetype, which is that sense of a wise woman will give people opportunity, they'll support them, they'll enable them to grow, they will, do everything. But if the person is not stepping up, the wise woman will move on. So it's that ability to sit somebody down and say, look, for example, you keep telling me you want to be a leader, but these are all the things that we require of you as a leader, and I'm just not seeing you do them. So let's actually work on that. What is holding you back from stepping into this leadership that we know you're capable of? The wise woman asks really good questions of people, which draw that out of them. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there are some people who aren't suited to it. And that's the point. We have to acknowledge that and let them go, but in a very non-judgmental and very supportive way. You might say, look, you might be a great leader in someone else's business. It's just not working in this business. How do I support you to make that exit and find the job that's going to be right for you?
We recorded this podcast because we couldn't wait to get our assessment, because it's like upon our own insights, I can see where that's something that I need help with. And she was saying for her, I don't know what archetype it was for her, but it's like even for the last 9 years up until this year, she's like been the person who does it all for everyone. She doesn't allow, it's like the perfectionist. She won't let anyone else do it. So this year she actually just was like, I need to finally just let go of the reins, but that's been so foreign to her. So she was excited for the assessment to kind of see what she needs to work on for that.
Yeah. And that's that lone wolf archetype, that doing everything yourself because I need to be in control to feel safe. Because the 4 shadow archetypes are about safety. The tyrant is when I over deliver, I feel safe. The safety is in knowing I'm doing more. The lone wolf is when I'm in control, I feel safe. When I've got my fingers in every pie, when I know what's going on, that sense of control. The martyr is when when people love me, I feel safe. And the hermit is when I'm in my little hermit cave, I feel safe.
Yeah.
So it's really thinking about, what is it that creates that sense of safety for us? And then being okay with we do need to have courage. We need to step out, that courage, compassion, clarity piece for people.
Yes. Was it the martyr that you said to people pleaser? I feel like that was the big one for me as well. Only this year did I find my voice and start saying no, because I didn't realize till I became a mother too how much resentment I was unconsciously holding. So I kept saying yes to all these things when I really wanted to say no. So this year I had to get really good at being like, no. And I actually had to Google like 50 different ways to say no, because I didn't know how to just say no. Like it's so foreign to me.
Yeah, I have a set of no scripts that I give clients who are struggling with that. Like, here's all these ways that you can say no in a way that's graceful, that feels comfortable, doesn't make you feel like you're being a bitch. It just makes you feel like you're setting a good boundary. So something like, look, I'd really love to help you with that, but I don't have the capacity right now. Nobody's going to take offense to that.
No, it's still things that I'm personally still working on. But where does that come from? It's like, I feel like maybe women, we've just been brought up to think like you have to put everyone else before yourself. And a lot of the time we're just put on the back burner. And then when you become a mum, you're like, I'm really on the back burner. Like I need to start making me a priority, and realize every time I say yes to something else, I'm saying no to me or no to time with my baby. So motherhood's definitely helped me get a little bit better with my boundaries.
Absolutely, because we do that. It's almost like for a lot of women, the wiring is the default wiring is to sacrifice. And look, it comes from, childhood experiences and seeing, how parents interacted, that kind of thing, the kinds of things we were rewarded for as children and so on. We don't have time to go into that in great detail, but that's where it comes from, this modeling of, women sacrificing and putting themselves last for everything. And so, that burnout of giving everything to everybody else until there's nothing left. And some women really struggle with no. It's that sense of I can't possibly say that to somebody because I'd feel so bad. I'd feel like a terrible parent, a terrible friend, a terrible workmate, whatever it is, if I said no to somebody. But then you give them the no scripts and they try them out. They're like, oh my God, I felt so bad. But what happened? Oh, the person was quite okay with it. You know, it's like, oh my God, I said that. And someone was quite okay with the fact I said no. They were, you know.
Yeah, I went to a women's retreat. I just think it might be powerful to share this. It was literally a year ago. And I don't know if you've seen or heard the activity where someone asks you and they ask it really quickly. And then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? So you like unconsciously, whatever comes out, comes out. And they'll ask you, like, why don't you say no? And what kept coming up for me was this fear of, I don't want people to think that I don't care. Like, I don't want people to be offended. I don't want people to think that I don't care. But when she kept nudging me and she's like, but then what happens? But then what happens? Where I finally got to was like, I don't want to be alone. So it's kind of like this evolutionary theory that I feel like if I keep people pleasing people, it will keep me in part of a pack because I don't want to be alone. If I'm alone, I'll die and nobody will be there to look after me. So that was what was like underneath it all. It's just so interesting.
It's so primal,
beliefs.
Isn't it? And that's again a human instinct piece, which is about if you go back to caveman days, if our tribe was attacked and all the men were killed and the women were taken captive, it was in our best interest to become as friendly as possible with the people in that tribe so they didn't kill us and didn't harm our children. So the fawn response that comes out, if you've heard of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, the fawn response, which is that people pleasing, is that response to that. When I don't feel safe, I fawn, because this idea, it's also called tend and befriend, which I like too. This idea of I've got to be super friendly with everybody so they don't kill me and my children.
Literally.
And that's what it comes down to,
It was so weird that came out of my mouth because unconsciously I wasn't conscious of it. And then I was like, wow, that's what's driving me is I'm scared I'm going to die alone if people think that I don't care and I say no. I'm like, wow.
And it comes out a lot for women when they have children, like you've said for yourself, because you've now, again, getting back to that human instinct, we've now got a child to protect. So it's even more important that people look after us and care about us and, are friendly with us, because it's not only are we going to be alone, but our children are going to starve to death or freeze to death as well, because we're responsible for them. So it's interesting how much this goes back to, prehistory in a lot of ways. You look at the wiring of humans through these hundreds of thousands of years of being human. And then the modern world is only the last 250 years, which is like this micro blip in human history. But we carry the instincts around this. So for a mother, the instinct to protect our children by being nice to people so they don't attack our children, they'll accept us, becomes even more powerful, because we've got to protect our kids. So the fawn response in women is really a common response to feeling threatened.
I think it circles really beautifully back to what you said at the start, like feminine leadership is kind of tribal leadership. It's how we've always lived and worked with our kids near us. And it's not till this industrial era that's happened that was predominantly created by men. And the reason that women aren't finding themselves working very well within it is because we didn't really create it ourselves. We've been forced to kind of fit into it. And it's like, we've either got to try inspire or have amazing women like you are trying to change the workplace, or women are opting out to create their own workplaces that align with their values, which is obviously the space that I get to work in. So lots of work that still needs to be done, but I'm so grateful there's women like us in that space who are passionate about it. It's
so exciting. I mean, like I suppose one of my regrets is I probably won't see this in my lifetime, because, in my late 50s now, but it's one of those things. What I would love to see, my vision for the world would be a working world where both types of leadership are equally valued, where both types of voices are heard at the table, where there's diversity, where we've got equal numbers of men and women, and that's all the other diverse things, about humans, all in the mix at the top tables, in workplaces, in government, all the places where decisions get made, that everybody's voice is heard and represented in some way, and that workplaces become human friendly. Because it's not just about women, this is about men as well, being able to spend time with their families, have hobbies, have a life. Work is not everything, and we've made it into everything. And there's a beautiful, it's a joke actually from years and years ago, and I can't remember, I'll paraphrase it very, very broadly, but it's a story about an American guy who goes to Italy and he sees this guy who's, owns a fishing boat, one fishing boat, and he sails out in the morning and he comes back at about lunchtime. And the American guy says, so what do you do? I'm fishing. I'm, catching fish for my family. And he says, well, why do you do that? It's like, why don't you stay out all day and catch more fish, and then you can sell them and make money. And then when you've got enough money, you can buy a second fishing boat. You can hire another guy to sell another fishing boat. And then you can go out together and you can, and he basically paints this big picture of how, how this guy could do this. And then the fisherman says, and then what happens? And he said, and then you can retire and you can spend all this time with your family and spending time at home. And the fisherman's looking at him and going, because that's exactly what he does.
This is why I love you, because I've actually got that in my book, The Surrender Project. When I wrote
Yeah.
my book, The Surrender Project was
I haven't
exactly.
got to that yet. Yeah.
But that's the journey I was on. I feel like I got to the pinnacle of my career and my business just for me to kind of surrender and realize all the things that I'm chasing. It's the things for me, particularly as a woman and feminine leadership and in the season of life I'm in. It's not necessarily about the job role, the income. It really does come down to what does your day look like, and what is the paycheck actually worth when it's coming at the expense of maybe your values and what's important to you. So it's such an important conversation. I know it's one that's really relevant to the season of life that I'm in and the women that I'm surrounded by. So I know they're going to love this conversation in this episode. Like I said, I'm excited because Shani and I and our leadership team have just done your assessment tool. So we might even do another podcast in the new year where Shani and I can openly talk about our results, because we're going to have a debrief session with you. But
That'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. But for any ladies who are listening and tuning in, where can they find you? How can they work with you? Can they do the assessment tool themselves? Maybe share a little bit about that, and we'll make sure I pop it all in the show notes for them.
Yeah, definitely. So I just probably need to just say there's two types of assessment. There's a third one coming, but there's two at the moment. One is a self-assessment, and the other one is a 360 or multi-rater of feedback assessment, where you get feedback from other people, which is the one that you and your team have done. So there's an opportunity to do either of those assessments. You can find me in a couple of places. My main consulting business is called Shaping Change. So it's shapingchange.com.au. And then the Women's Leader Archetypes of fairly recently got their own home. So it's womensleaderarchetypes.com.au. And that was because I'd sort of got to the point where I went, it's important enough, it needs its own space. So I separated out of my consulting business. And look, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. So Rosalind Cardinal, you can find me in a few places. I'm on Twitter, but I'm kind of thinking about moving off. So let's just say, if you look for me on Twitter, you'll find me, but I don't know whether or not how active I'm going to be on there in the future. But yeah, look, and people can certainly do the assessment. If they do the self-assessment, there's an option for a self-guided, pre-recorded video series on how to interpret your results. So you can do that without necessarily having a debrief if you don't want to, or you can get debriefed. I'm also accrediting other women coaches in using the tool. So if you're a coach who coaches women and you think this appeals to you, love to have a conversation about whether or not you get accredited in the tool and use it in your work, because again, this is much bigger than me. It needs to get out into the world. And I'm doing that through the network of accredited coaches.
Yes, I'll make sure to pop all that in the show notes. But thank you again for your time today. I've been loving soaking up all your wisdom and having you in my orbit, and excited for us to continue the conversation in the new year, because I know Shani and I are working on our own leadership. Like I said, we feel like we have been in leadership 10 years now, but we still feel like we're only babies, and we're still learning and still wanting to improve and serve and have more impact. So grateful to have you in our corner helping us do that.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversation. It's been fun.
I hope you're feeling inspired after that conversation, and it's empowered you to make some amazing changes and choices in your life. Don't forget, let us know if you love this episode by giving us a 5-star review. It really helps to know that we're on the right track with serving you guys, and it also really supports our channel as well. If you head over to the link in our bio on Instagram, you'll get access to all of our goodies, including our signature 8-week container, her Renaissance. And don't forget, head over to the show notes. Make sure you check out any of the links, the books, or the references that we mentioned in this episode. And before we go, we just want to say thank you so much for being here, for being committed to your best self, and for showing up for you today. You are amazing. If you think that there is someone in your life that could really benefit from this episode, while you're feeling super inspired, please hit that share button, or you can share it on your Instagram. Make sure you tag us. We really want to empower others with our message and our purpose. So by you sharing, it just really helps us elevate that mission and message out to the world, and really helps us to inspire more people. So head over to www.babestalkingbusiness.com. Check out all of our other podcast episodes, and we are sending you so much love. See you soon.